The rich boy walked into the luxurious hall, his designer shoes clicking against the polished marble floor. He wore a perfectly tailored suit and a smug smile, as if the world belonged to him alone. Everyone around him noticed his confidence. But it was more than confidence. It was arrogance, a young man born into wealth. He had never known struggle. Every desire had been fulfilled before he even asked for it. His parents, sitting nearby, watched him with pride, laughing at his jokes and encouraging his boldness. They had taught him that money could solve anything, that respect was something you earned by how much you owned, not by how you treated others. The boy moved through the crowd, greeting people half-heartedly, barely acknowledging anyone unless it benefited him. He laughed loudly, drawing attention to himself, enjoying the admiring glances from some and the envy from others. His world was a bubble of privilege, and he had no idea that life outside this bubble worked differently. In another corner of the hall, the black CEO prepared for the meeting. She was a woman who had worked her entire life to achieve success. Every decision she made carried weight, and she had earned the respect of hundreds of employees and business partners. Her presence was calm, but commanding, a contrast to the flashy, careless energy of the rich boy. She noticed him immediately, sensing the arrogance and entitlement in his every movement. He walked with a swagger that suggested he thought the rules of respect did not apply to him. Meanwhile, his parents whispered jokes to each other, enjoying their son's antics. They assumed their wealth and connections made them untouchable, that no one could stand up to them or question their behavior. The CEO, however, paid them little attention, focusing on her work and preparing to handle the business meeting with her usual precision. The rich boy could not resist showing off. He carried a glass of orange juice in one hand and a phone in the other, constantly checking messages and posting stories online. His world revolved around attention, admiration, and amusement, not responsibility or empathy. He spotted the CEO and decided to make a scene, wanting to prove he was important, that he could command attention from anyone, even from someone as successful as her. The parents giggled when they saw him approach her, whispering, "Watch this, he'll charm her." They had no idea that charm had nothing to do with respect or professionalism. The rich boy leaned in with a careless smile, trying to get her attention, completely unaware of the storm that would follow. Around them, the atmosphere was filled with chatter and laughter, but the tension between the boy's arrogance and the CEO's calm dignity created an invisible line that could not be crossed lightly. Onlookers noticed the contrast immediately. Some admired the CEO's composure, while others cringed at the boy's recklessness. The boy, however, was oblivious. He had been taught that wealth made him untouchable, that mistakes could always be fixed with an apology or a check, that life had no real consequences for someone like him. His parents' laughter only fueled his confidence, making him bolder and less aware of boundaries. He moved closer to the CEO, unaware that this moment would change everything. The scene was set, the clash between arrogance and dignity waiting to happen. The rich boy's world of privilege and the CEO's world of hard-earned respect were about to collide in a way no one could have predicted. The audience, though invisible to him, watched silently, sensing that the arrogance he carried like a crown could not go unchallenged. It was a meeting not just of people, but of values, of character, of the difference between money and true respect. The CEO adjusted her suit calmly, her eyes sharp and steady, knowing that the moment the boy crossed a line, there would be no turning back. Meanwhile, the boy's parents leaned back in their seats, still laughing, still confident that the world would bend to their wealth and influence. They had no idea that the lesson about arrogance, respect, and consequences was about to unfold in a way that would shock them. Everything seemed normal on the surface. The rich boy smiling, the CEO focused, the parents laughing, but underneath, tension simmered. Every glance, every gesture, every careless movement carried the weight of the coming storm. The rich boy thought he was in control, thinking this was just another event to flaunt his privilege. But little did he know that respect could not be bought, and arrogance, no matter how rich, often comes with consequences. This was the beginning of a story that would shock everyone in the room, a story of entitlement meeting accountability, and the lesson would be unforgettable. The rich boy, full of confidence, lifted his glass of juice, and swaggered toward the CEO, thinking this would be an easy moment to show off his charm. He smirked, imagining everyone watching and admiring his boldness. His parents chuckled behind him, whispering, "Watch him, he's going to impress her." They had no idea that the CEO was not the type to be impressed by wealth or arrogance. She looked up from her notes as he approached, her expression calm, but her eyes sharp. He raised his glass, too high and in a careless twist. The juice tipped and spilled all over her. The golden liquid soaked her suit and dripped onto the table. A perfect storm of chaos caused by a moment of thoughtlessness. The room went silent, eyes turning toward the scene, some in shock, others in disbelief. The rich boy froze for a second, but only because he was surprised by the sound of the spill. Then he laughed, thinking it was funny, thinking it would be a joke that everyone would enjoy. His parents joined in, clapping their hands and chuckling loudly, encouraging him. Their laughter echoed through the hall, mocking the CEO, as if she were supposed to laugh too. But the CEO remained standing, her composure unshaken. She calmly looked at the boy, then at his parents, and her calmness made the silence in the room heavier. Everyone felt the tension, knowing something important had just happened. The rich boy, unaware, wiped his hands on his expensive suit, still smiling, still thinking he was untouchable. People around them started whispering, noticing the disrespect and the arrogance. Staff and other guests stared, sensing that this was no ordinary accident. The CEO calmly picked up a napkin and wiped herself, her movements slow and deliberate, showing that she was in control. She could have reacted angrily, shouted, or made a scene, but she chose to remain dignified. Her silence spoke louder than any words could. The rich boy began to feel a tiny flicker of unease, but it was quickly drowned out by his parents' laughter. They leaned in, saying, "Don't worry, everyone knows who you are. No one will take this seriously." He believed them, thinking the world would bend to his privilege, thinking money could erase any mistake. But the CEO did not say a word, and that silence made him uncomfortable. He tried to laugh again, trying to act like it was funny. But this time, the room did not laugh with him. The other guests avoided eye contact, some shaking their heads, others quietly whispering about how disrespectful he was. His parents, still laughing, did not notice the shift in the room's energy. The CEO finally spoke, her voice calm but firm. "Accidents happen, but respect is not optional," she said, and her words struck everyone like a lightning bolt. The rich boy looked at her, confused, not understanding what she meant. His parents frowned slightly, realizing that maybe she was serious. The CEO's gaze was steady, her eyes meeting his, showing that this was not a game. This was a lesson he was about to learn, whether he liked it or not. The room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for his reaction. He laughed nervously, trying to shrug it off, but did not feel the same anymore. The weight of the moment pressed down on him. His parents stopped laughing, sensing that their influence might not save him this time. He tried to smile, but it was weak, forced, as the reality of the situation began to sink in. The spill, small as it was, had created a storm bigger than he could imagine. It was more than juice on a suit. It was arrogance meeting dignity, privilege meeting principle. The CEO calmly excused herself from the table, leaving a stunned audience behind. Everyone understood that this was a turning point, that respect could not be bought, that wealth could not shield him from the consequences of careless behavior. The rich boy stared after her, finally realizing that this was not a joke, that this moment was bigger than him, bigger than his laughter. This was a moment where entitlement clashed with accountability, and for the first time, he felt a flicker of fear. Little did he know, this was just the beginning. The CEO had more to teach, more to show, and the $583 million deal was hanging in the balance. What started as a careless spill of juice was about to turn into a life-changing lesson about respect, power, and consequences. The rich boy's arrogance would soon meet a reality he could never ignore, and his parents' laughter would soon turn to disbelief. The stage was set, and the next move would change everything. After the juice spill, the room was filled with whispers, shocked glances, and uneasy silence. The rich boy tried to laugh it off, waving his hands as if nothing had happened, but the laughter sounded hollow even to him. And for the first time, he noticed the tense looks from the guests around him. His parents still try to play it off, nudging him and saying, "It's fine, nobody really cares." But their words no longer carried the power they once did. The CEO had returned to her seat, calm, composed, and completely unaffected by his antics. She continued her work, typing notes and reviewing documents, showing that her focus was unshakable. The room seemed to revolve around her poise, and it made the rich boy feel smaller, an unfamiliar feeling that prickled at the edge of his confidence. The rich boy glanced at the spilled juice on her designer suit and the faint stain that refused to disappear completely. He expected her to be furious, expecting anger, shouting, or at least a dramatic reaction. Instead, she remained controlled, and that control was far more intimidating than any yelling could have been. The guests noticed the subtle shift in power, that respect and authority did not come from money, but from self-control and strength of character. The boy's parents finally realized that their wealth could not protect him in this moment, that their laughter had only made him look smaller, and their influence had limits. Meanwhile, the CEO quietly spoke to her assistant, her voice low but firm. "Prepare a full review of the deal with their company," she said, signaling that this incident would not be forgotten, that this was more than a simple spill. It was a test of respect and accountability. The rich boy, overhearing fragments, did not understand the seriousness of her words. He thought she was overreacting, that the world would forgive him because he was rich, that money had always erased mistakes. But this time, he was wrong. The CEO's mind was sharp, focused on principles, and she was planning her next move carefully. The rich boy's unease grew as he noticed the other executives whispering and exchanging glances. Some subtly shook their heads. Others tried to hide smirks. All of them seemed to recognize the arrogance that had led to this moment. The parents shifted uncomfortably in their chairs, feeling the judgment of the room, feeling that their son's careless actions were about to cost them more than they imagined. The CEO did not need to speak loudly to command attention. Her calm confidence filled the room with a quiet power, and that power unsettled the rich boy more than any scolding could have done. He tried again to joke, leaning toward the CEO and saying, "It was just a little spill, come on." But this time, she looked up at him, her eyes steady and unyielding. "Respect is never a little thing," she replied calmly, her words cutting through the air. Each word made the rich boy's smile falter. Each pause made him feel smaller. The parents were stunned, their previous confidence crumbling, realizing that charm, money, and influence could not fix this. The CEO's stance made it clear that she would not compromise her dignity, and that message echoed in the room louder than any applause. The rich boy's heart pounded as he realized the situation was far bigger than he had imagined. This was no longer about spilled juice or a small embarrassment. This was a confrontation between entitlement and principle, between arrogance and respect. He swallowed hard, unsure how to recover, while his parents exchanged worried glances. Understanding that the $583 million deal might hang by a thread because of his thoughtless behavior, the CEO had all the power now, not in a threatening way, but in a way that made it impossible to ignore her authority. The lesson was clear. Wealth could not erase disrespect, and arrogance could have consequences far beyond what he had ever imagined. As the rich boy sank into his chair, feeling the weight of the moment, Dassault quietly returned to her notes, preparing to take action. The room buzzed with tension, everyone watching, waiting for the next move. It was a moment that would change the trajectory of his life. And the rich boy knew, deep down, that this was just the beginning. The arrogance that had carried him for years was about to meet accountability in the most powerful way imaginable. After the tension in the room settled, Dassault leaned back in her chair, her eyes sharp and calculating. She had made a decision, one that would not only teach a lesson, but also protect her integrity and the respect she had worked so hard to earn. The rich boy, still fidgeting in his seat, had no idea that this moment would change everything. He thought he could apologize lightly or charm his way out, but she had other plans. The parents whispered to each other nervously, sensing that their Usual influence and wealth might not save their son this time. The CEO called her assistant over quietly, giving precise instructions. Review the $583 million deal carefully and prepare an updated report, she said. Her voice was calm, but carried a weight that demanded immediate action. Everyone in the room sensed that something major was about to happen. The rich boy noticed her speaking to the assistant and tried to lean over, whispering, "It's fine, we can fix this, right?" But the CEO did not even look at him. Her focus was on business, on principles, and on making sure that respect and accountability would be upheld. The parents felt their confidence slipping, realizing that this was not going to be a simple apology and forgiveness. They had underestimated her, thinking that wealth and privilege could erase a careless act. The CEO understood power, but she understood respect even more. She knew that if she ignored this incident, it would set a dangerous precedent, not just for this meeting, but for every future interaction. Meanwhile, the rich boy grew more restless, his arrogance mixing with unease. He tried to laugh nervously, glancing at his parents for reassurance. But their smiles were forced. Their usual certainty had been shaken. The CEO's calm determination was creating a tension that was almost tangible. The assistants began preparing documents and reviewing agreements. Every detail of the $583 million deal was under scrutiny, and the CEO left nothing to chance. She wanted to ensure that the lesson would be undeniable and fair. This was not about revenge. It was about principle, about showing that disrespect has real consequences. The rich boy finally realized that he could not charm or joke his way out this time. The spilled juice, which had seemed like a minor accident, had become a symbol of arrogance and carelessness. The CEO's reputation, her hard-earned success, and her dignity were at stake, and she would protect them. The parents shifted nervously, their laughter and confidence gone, replaced with a growing fear of what was about to unfold. They had always believed that wealth gave them control, but for the first time, they understood that not everything could be bought or ignored. The CEO called the rich boy over, her voice calm but firm. "We need to discuss the deal," she said. Her words carried a subtle warning, a quiet power that made him feel small despite his expensive suit and designer shoes. The room seemed to hold its breath as he approached, unsure of what to expect. The CEO did not raise her voice or show anger, but her composure made the moment feel heavier than any confrontation could. She explained that trust, respect, and professionalism were essential, and that any partnership without these values was not acceptable. The rich boy tried to argue, saying it was an accident, but the CEO's steady gaze made him falter. She then revealed her decision to her assistant. "Cancel the deal if they cannot demonstrate accountability," she instructed. Her calm confidence sent shockwaves through the room. The rich boy and his parents were stunned, realizing that their wealth could not save them this time. The $583 million deal, which they had assumed was untouchable, was now hanging by a thread. All the arrogance, all the privilege, all the laughter seemed meaningless in the face of dignity and principle. The CEO's bold action was about to set an example that would be remembered by everyone present. As the rich boy sank back into his chair, fear creeping into his mind, he finally understood that this was bigger than a spill. This was about respect, integrity, and accountability. The CEO had shown that she would not compromise her values, and that every action, no matter how small, had consequences. The room remained tense, everyone aware that this moment marked a turning point, and the rich boy's world of entitlement was about to meet a reality he could no longer ignore. The room was heavy with tension as the CEO finally addressed the rich boy and his parents directly. Her calm voice cut through the air, sharper than any shouting could ever be. "Your behavior today shows a lack of respect and accountability," she said, her eyes unwavering as they met the boy's. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, realizing that charm and money would not fix this. His parents gasped, their confidence shaken for the first time. They had always believed that their influence could protect him, that wealth could erase mistakes, but now they were beginning to understand the power of principle. The CEO continued, "I cannot trust a partnership built on entitlement and arrogance, and I expect accountability for actions. The rich boy tried to speak, stammering, "I am sorry. It was just an accident." But his apology sounded hollow, even to himself. The CEO's gaze did not waver, her calmness amplifying the weight of her words. "An apology is not enough when respect has been violated," she said. "Actions have consequences, and this deal reflects my values as well as the integrity of my company." The parents looked at each other in disbelief, unable to comprehend that their son's careless act could jeopardize a $583 million deal. Their laughter, which had seemed so justified earlier, now felt distant and foolish. The CEO stood slowly, her posture commanding, and gestured to her assistant, who brought forward the documents related to the deal. She spread them across the table, each contract and agreement a reminder that this was not just a minor mistake, but a serious business relationship. The rich boy's fingers fidgeted, tapping nervously against his suit, realizing that the CEO had the power and authority to enforce her decision. "If trust is broken, so is the deal," she said calmly, "and I will not compromise on principle, no matter the sum involved." The room felt frozen, the tension so thick it could be cut with a knife. His parents tried to interject, offering excuses and pleading with her. "We can make this right," they said, their voices shaky, but the CEO did not respond to them directly. Her silence was stronger than words, and it spoke louder than any argument could. The rich boy looked from his parents to the CEO, panic beginning to settle in. He had never faced someone who could match his wealth with unwavering moral authority, someone who could challenge not only him, but the world he had always believed he controlled. The guests watched quietly, some whispering in awe, others shaking their heads in disbelief, witnessing a masterclass in dignity and leadership. The CEO's assistant handed her a tablet showing the projected financial outcomes, and she studied it carefully before speaking again. "This deal was worth $583 million, but no sum of money can replace integrity. Respect and accountability are priceless, and I will not compromise them for wealth or status." Her words landed like a hammer, final and resolute. The rich boy swallowed hard, realizing that this was not a negotiation, that the CEO's values were absolute, and that his world of privilege offered no safety net. His parents finally fell silent, the weight of reality pressing down on them as they understood that the power of money had limits. The CEO's calm authority created an invisible barrier, a line that could not be crossed. She had made it clear that disrespect, entitlement, and arrogance had consequences, and the $583 million deal was no longer guaranteed. The rich boy felt a cold panic creeping into his chest, for the first time recognizing that every action had repercussions, and that respect could not be bought or faked. The CEO returned to her seat, her composure unwavering, while the rich boy slumped back, defeated and unsure how to recover. The parents exchanged guilty glances, realizing that their laughter and indulgence had enabled this moment, and that wealth was never a shield against accountability. By the time the meeting ended, the room had changed. The air was thick with respect for the CEO and a newfound understanding for the rich boy and his parents. The lesson was clear. Arrogance and privilege could not overpower integrity, and even the most luxurious life could be humbled by principle. The CEO's decisive stance had not only protected her own dignity, but also sent a powerful message to everyone watching. The rich boy and his parents had begun to realize that respect, humility, and accountability were far more valuable than any sum of money, and that their arrogance had cost them far more than they ever imagined. After the meeting ended, the room slowly emptied, but the tension lingered like a heavy fog. The rich boy sat in stunned silence, staring at the table where the CEO had calmly laid out the documents. His mind raced, trying to understand how a simple act of carelessness had turned into a crisis. His parents hovered nearby, their faces pale and anxious, realizing for the first time that money could not erase mistakes or demand respect. The laughter that had once filled the room now seemed absurd and distant, replaced by a gnawing fear that the $583 million deal, their pride and power, was slipping away. The rich boy's arrogance, which had once seemed untouchable, felt fragile, like glass ready to shatter at the smallest pressure. Word of the incident began to spread through the business community. Whispered messages and quiet conversations painting a picture of a CEO who would not tolerate disrespect. The rich boy had hoped that wealth would protect him, that the world would bend to his privilege. But now he saw that reputation, integrity, and principle were far stronger than any fortune. His parents tried to calm him, murmuring, "It's just a misunderstanding. It will blow over." But even they knew their words rang hollow. The CEO's quiet authority had made a statement louder than any public announcement could. Meanwhile, the CEO reviewed every aspect of the deal, scrutinizing the agreements, projections, and terms. She considered not only the financial implications, but also the message her decision would send about accountability. Her team worked quickly, preparing for the possibility that she might have to cancel the $583 million contract. And everyone in the office knew this was a bold move. Her strength and decisiveness inspired her employees, who admired her commitment to integrity. They whispered among themselves about how rare it was to see someone uphold principles over profit. Back at the rich boy's home, the mood was tense. His parents argued quietly, realizing that their son's careless behavior might cost them more than just a business deal. They had lived their lives believing money could solve problems. But this incident shattered that illusion. The rich boy stared at his reflection in the mirror, his confident expression replaced by confusion and fear. For the first time, he understood that arrogance could have consequences, that privilege did not grant immunity. His parents' disappointed faces weighed heavily on him, and he began to feel the sting of accountability. As the CEO prepared her final decision, the rich boy and his parents waited anxiously, unsure if the deal could be saved. The silence was deafening, each moment stretching longer than the last. The CEO had become a symbol of authority and principle, showing that respect could not be bought or ignored. Her calm determination was a lesson in leadership, and the rich boy knew he had underestimated her from the very start. He realized that his behavior had consequences far beyond the spilled juice, that his actions could ripple across lives and fortunes. Finally, the CEO made her move, sending a clear message to the rich boy and his parents. The $583 million deal was canceled, not out of anger, but out of principle. She had shown that integrity, accountability, and respect mattered more than money or connections. The rich boy's parents were stunned, realizing that their world of privilege and entitlement had limits. Their laughter, once a symbol of arrogance, now felt like a memory of a lesson painfully learned. The boy slumped in his chair, finally facing the reality that the CEO had exposed. News of the canceled deal spread quickly, shocking the business community. Many admired the CEO for her courage and principles, while others whispered about the downfall of the family who had believed wealth could solve everything. The rich boy and his parents faced humiliation, but also the beginning of understanding. They saw for the first time that respect could not be demanded, that mistakes could not always be erased with money, and that every action had consequences. The incident became a turning point, a lesson in accountability, humility, and the limits of privilege. By the end of the day, the room was empty, but the lesson remained. The CEO's quiet strength had sent shockwaves through the lives of the rich boy, his parents, and everyone watching. This was more than spilled juice or a canceled deal. It was a story of courage, principle, and the power of respect, one that would not be forgotten anytime soon. After the shock of the canceled deal, the rich boy sat in silence, his mind racing. For the first time, he felt the weight of his actions pressing down on him. The spilled juice that had once seemed like a small accident now felt like a symbol of his arrogance and carelessness. His parents were beside him, their faces pale and filled with guilt. They had laughed at his behavior earlier, encouraged it even. But now they understood that their influence and money could not shield him from the consequences of disrespect. The boy stared at his expensive suit, realizing that all the status symbols he had relied on were meaningless in the face of integrity. For days, he replayed the incident in his mind, the calm, unwavering gaze of the CEO haunting him. He remembered her words, "Actions have consequences, and respect is priceless." Those words echoed in his thoughts, and slowly, a feeling he had never known began to grow. Humility. He began to see how entitlement had blinded him, how carelessness and arrogance had shaped his life in ways he never questioned. The parents, too, reflected on their own behavior, realizing that indulgence and pride had only enabled their son. They saw the truth. Money alone could never teach lessons of respect, character, or accountability. Meanwhile, the business world buzzed with the story. The CEO's bold decision became an example of strength and principle, inspiring respect and admiration from everyone. The rich boy's world of luxury and privilege seemed smaller now, his reputation tarnished, and his ego humbled. He could no longer ignore the reality that wealth did not make him superior, that respect could not be demanded. It had to be earned. He began to understand that the CEO's courage had revealed a truth that no amount of money could buy. The parents encouraged him to reflect, not just apologize, but truly change. They realized that this was a turning point, an opportunity for growth that could shape their son's future. He spent long hours thinking about how his actions had affected others, how arrogance and entitlement had isolated him from meaningful respect and relationships. Slowly, he felt a desire to make amends, to learn from the experience, and to grow into someone who could earn respect rather than expect it. The rich boy took small steps toward change, reaching out to apologize to people he had treated poorly in the past. He realized that humility required more than words. It required action, responsibility, and self-reflection. The parents, too, began to adjust their behavior, learning that nurturing values and character in their son mattered far more than wealth or influence. They encouraged accountability, honesty, and respect, and watched as their son slowly began to grow into a more thoughtful, considerate person. The CEO, unaware of the boy's internal struggle, had set an example that reached far beyond her office. Her decision to prioritize principle over profit resonated with employees, colleagues, and the wider business community. The rich boy's journey of growth began quietly, inspired by her unwavering stance. He realized that life's most valuable lessons often come from discomfort and consequences, that mistakes, when faced with honesty and reflection, could lead to meaningful change. Over time, the arrogance that had defined him faded, replaced by humility and a desire to learn. The spilled juice incident, once a symbol of carelessness, became a turning point that reshaped his values. His parents also learned that character and respect mattered far more than money. The canceled $583 million deal had been painful, but it became a lesson of growth, accountability, and the importance of standing up for what is right. By the end, the rich boy had changed, not overnight, but steadily, and the experience left an imprint on his life that no wealth could ever provide. He understood that respect could not be bought, arrogance could have consequences, and integrity was priceless. The CEO, through her courage and calm authority, had unknowingly guided him and his parents toward a life lesson that would last forever. The days after the canceled deal were quiet but heavy with reflection. The rich boy sat alone in his room, staring at the city skyline, thinking about everything that had happened. The spilled juice, the CEO's calm authority, the shock on his parents' faces, and the loss of the $583 million deal all replayed in his mind. He realized that this was more than a business incident. It was a turning point in his life. The arrogance and entitlement that had defined him for years now felt hollow and empty, replaced by a growing sense of humility. His parents watched him closely, noticing the change in their son. For the first time, he asked questions, sought understanding, and reflected on how his actions affected others. They had never imagined that such a simple moment could teach such a profound lesson. The spilled juice had been a small act, but had revealed a truth bigger than any amount of money, that respect could not be demanded, that privilege could not replace accountability, and that integrity was far more valuable than wealth. The CEO, meanwhile, continued her work, unaware of the ripple effect her actions had created. Her decision to cancel the deal was not just a lesson for one boy and his parents, but a demonstration to the entire business world that principle always comes before profit. Stories of her courage and calm authority spread, inspiring countless professionals to prioritize respect and ethics in their own lives. The rich boy had heard about the admiration she received, and it sparked something inside him. A desire to be better, not just richer. Slowly, he began to make amends, reaching out to those he had disrespected, apologizing sincerely, and learning to listen instead of assuming entitlement gave him power. His parents supported him, but they also learned from him, realizing that teaching humility and respect was far more important than flaunting wealth or protecting privilege. The boy started volunteering, helping in community programs, and observing how real respect and trust are earned through actions, not money. The incident became a story he would never forget, a reminder that even the smallest acts can have enormous consequences. The spilled juice had been a symbol of his carelessness, but it had transformed into a symbol of growth, responsibility, and understanding. He finally understood that mistakes were not failures if faced honestly, that humility, accountability, and integrity were the foundation of true success, and that wealth alone could never buy them. Months later, the rich boy's perspective had shifted completely. He no longer viewed the world as something to dominate with privilege, but as a place to navigate with respect and responsibility. His parents, too, had changed, supporting him in ways that emphasized character over status. They saw that teaching values, encouraging accountability, and nurturing empathy were far more powerful than any fortune. The CEO's quiet courage had sparked a transformation that reached far beyond the boardroom, creating a lesson that would last a lifetime. Finally, the rich boy reflected on everything, understanding that life's greatest victories are not measured in money or deals, but in the strength of character, the respect earned from others, and the ability to learn from mistakes. The spilled juice, once an embarrassing moment, had become the catalyst for change, shaping him into someone humble, thoughtful, and aware of his impact on the world. He knew that the CEO's decision was not just about canceling a deal, but about teaching a lesson that could never be forgotten. By the end, the family had grown, the boy had matured, and a powerful truth had been made clear. Respect cannot be bought, arrogance can be costly, and integrity is priceless. The story of the spilled juice, the canceled deal, and the unwavering soul became more than a headline. It became a life lesson, a reminder that character always outshines privilege, and that courage and principle will always triumph in the end.